Welcome back to the Six Sessions. So we're starting to make these more regular now. So luckily for you, you're going to see more of me in these coming weeks. Over the last 2 years, it's been my favorite part of the week, getting to speak candidly with some of the people I find most interesting in the growth space. And today's guests sit in that space that often gets overlooked when we think about the growth machines that we're building. Hey, Peter, thanks for joining us and welcome to this week's Six Sessions.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to the conversation.
More than welcome. Today's session is going to hone in on sales and, importantly, how sales move away from pitching and towards coaching prospects to be more successful. The grow at all costs, always be closing model, in my humble opinion, is dead. Today's guest is going to give us insight into how sales leaders can help move away from those old stereotypes in sales. We're going to talk about what makes a high performer in sales, how you encourage those behaviors, and how you support those still chasing their target. Today's guest is someone who's been coaching in the sales space for over 35 years, and I'm sure he's seen some things along the way. He's a sales coach that believes the end customer's success should be at the heart of every sales conversation and in the power of prospect coaching. We're going to talk sales, nurturing sales talent, technology in sales, and antique violas. I hope I pronounced that right this time around. Over the last 2 years, the Six Sessions have given me the opportunity to chat with some amazing people in the growth space, and today's guest fits that mold perfectly. He's an independent sales coach who's worked across most B2B sectors over the last 35 years. So if you care about sales performance, this is going to be insightful 30 minutes. These chats are designed to be short and sweet, but hopefully full of insight, and it's definitely unfiltered, which, as a reminder, is the fun bit. Joining us from Banbury in the UK, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Peter Button. Peter, welcome.
Thanks, Rich, thanks for the invitation. Really impressed with looking back at the archive of these recordings. You've had some really good people on the sessions, most enjoyable. Thank you.
All of them far smarter than me. I'm kind of working on the principle that I'm kind of made to look smarter by association. That's generally what I'm going for. So first off, what is an antique viola, and how did you get into that?
Well, you'll see. There's like a lot of people. I have a collection of instruments these days, and it started out with guitars, and then about 25 years ago, took up cello, moved to viola. We'll come back to this, but you gave me an advance warning. So that's a violin. Okay, that's a violin, and
yep.
And by contrast, that's a viola. So a viola is a big violin. It's the one between the violin and the cello, and it plays a really important role within orchestra. All sorts of stuff. This is a particularly lovely violin. It was made in 1914 in Marylebone in London, right at the heart, at the peak of the Edwardian era, just as the British Empire was about to head into Great War. Made by the maker for his brother. And one of his brothers didn't make it back from France. So lots of stories about that, but it's a passion.
Nice. I look forward to hearing more about that. So you work in sales. How was Q1 for you?
So we're a micro business. For many years now, the business has been myself and my wife, so that said, the short answer, Rich, we've just had the best Q1 ever, and through the career, we've emerged out of pandemic and heading into pandemic. Like many people in my sort of role, I was traveling a lot, physically going out to clients. Through pandemic, everything, of course, became virtual. That's continued post-pandemic. I'm now doing more and better work. I'm doing the best work of my career, having more impact, primarily because of more frequent, more consistent contact, engagement with people I'm working with. And it makes such a difference. Not trying to fit change programs into events that people then have to remember about for a few weeks before you then pick it up again. To be able to have consistent contact week in, week out. But bottom line, for us, things are actually going really well, Rich.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And then like over the Q4, Q1, there's I think a lot of people have started struggle or like things have slowed down a bit. So it's good to hear that there's success. So I'm going to scratch into like what you're doing and how you're doing it, so that we can try and kind of eke some of that out. So what is your main business? What does Sales Reset do?
Okay, so Sales Reset is a brand that emerged kind of half a dozen years or so ago. Our company name is Real World Strategy, but the story started way back in late 80s. I had started my sales career in my mid-20s, had some success there, and without getting into all the details, concluded to start my own sales training business, and that's been what I've done ever since. So worked as an independent now for over 35 years, and learned a lot from my clients, with my clients, of course. Sales Reset has emerged because of the need for a fundamental shift in how selling is done. I mean, a fundamental reset. And if I'm summarizing it, it's to do with stopping salespeople talking about their products and services, and instead absolutely focusing on the successful outcomes and impact that their customers are trying to achieve. And that's far easier said than done. And at the heart of it is the idea of turning salespeople, especially B2B salespeople, and especially in relatively higher value opportunity situations, turning these people into genuine coaches, able to coach customers about what they're trying to achieve.
But every prospect loves a feature-driven sale, surely.
Well, Rich, you've actually hit on the number one challenge, that salespeople respond to the behaviors of their customers, and as soon as customers get interested in something, they start asking questions, and salespeople think, "Oh, great, they're interested," and so we start answering the questions. Every answer leads to another question, and then your 45 minutes is up, and the customer has learned a lot, which they believe will help them make an informed decision. But of course, they could have been asking all the wrong questions.
Okay, well, I am definitely going to ask you about some of the biggest challenges that you see in sales. So we'll dig into that in a minute. But how did you get into sales? Because you studied engineering. So how did you go from engineering in, was it Swansea, I think?
That's it. Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So engineering in the...
You've done your research. I started the career. I did 5 years in production management in a factory, and I realized that I didn't like the regularity. The whole sales route was opening up as a career choice. Hadn't occurred to me previously. A pal mentioned the idea, and I was able to start with so this is now in a different era, Rich. I was trained to sell accounting systems that were paper based. And I had some absolutely super sales training from a company called Kalamazoo, and it was how to sell half a box of pre-printed stationery to look after your accounts and payroll. And the only way you could do that was selling the as it was told at the time, the benefits of that stationery, not what it was. So I was taught to sell through a 13-week residential sales training course at the beginning of my career, which was pivotal in terms of where things went from there.
So it's funny actually, like how everything is cyclical, because I have a journal type thing, which I've always been very digital in nature, but I now have a journal that kind of maps things up, but it's physical. It's written. I actually write in it with a pen. So it's amazing how things have gone from kind of the written kind of stationary based to digital to back to the written.
Rich, does that make you a fountain pen nerd?
Do you know what? I do love a good pen. So for my graduation present for my parents, I got a Mont Blanc that sits in a box and look at it. But I'm not the fountain pen thing. I'm a little bit too much of a scribbler to do it justice. I'm much more of a ball pen kind of guy, unfortunately.
but there is something valuable, and I've kept a journal since I was a teenager. Now I've actually gone the other route. I use Day One, the journaling app, But rarely does a day go by without some reflection in journal. It's hugely valuable.
Well, when I first started working with a mentor, one of the first things he said to me, I'd like highly recommend you start journaling. Just ask yourself, like start off with what were the biggest challenges you had today, like what are the ideas you've got, and what's the one thing that you want to achieve the next day, and just get up to spark. Like sometimes it's complete waffle, and sometimes there's some ideas in there. And I'm one of those people who very much like struggles to get everything out of my head in any given space, but my head also goes into hyperdrive as soon as I hit the pillow. So yeah, it's a really good practice.
There's a super book. I'm tempted to pull it off the shelf behind us. There's a super book called the reflective practice, reflective journal. Can't remember the name. I'll perhaps pull it out. It might go into show notes. The habit of journaling is a terrific way of getting stuff out of head, and I use it for me using this journaling app day one. I search back on how my thoughts have developed. So you search a term and you think, I've only been thinking about that for in recent weeks, but you see it recurring.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. So why move into sales coaching? So you were selling stationary based accountancy tools. Why move into coaching?
So the steps along the way, I was trained to sell. I began to come across competitors who I realized were not aware of how they might be working differently with their customers. I thought that I could start my own business. I did that for a while. Then I became an associate with one of the training companies, as you do in that kind of career. And then it was probably around early 90s that I first began to come across coaching as a theme, as opposed to training. So what's this coaching thing? Subsequently, almost all my time now is spent coaching. It's the most sophisticated of communication styles. Enabling people to work stuff out for themselves as opposed to advising them it's a really hard thing to pull off. I speak as someone who is as tempted as anybody to advise. To learn how to coach is so challenging. And probably 10 years ago, I made the connection. Well, surely the best salespeople would be coaching and not advising. So there's the start. There's lots more that I could say, but I'd be interested in your perspective, Rich.
How did you go from the transition from practitioner to coach? So that is, I think a lot of people have the thought where you were talking about training there. I would say mentally speaking, training is a logical progression from I do, therefore I can train. So what were the steps you went through to actually becoming a coach and feeling like you were a coacher, not a trainer? What did you do to get to that point?
It's making me reflect on the process, the transition. I've got to say, what I'm drawn to as I reflect back there, it would be to do with the evidence of impact. What was the evidence of the impact of my training? And I was getting increasingly frustrated that the training that I was busting a gut to do really well wasn't achieving the outcomes that I was hoping for. But I think my own journey with coaching has probably paralleled the emergence of coaching as a kind of professional practice over the last 25, 30 years. A growing awareness of what structured coaching looks like. So you'll be familiar with Rich. The single most common coaching model is GROW from high performance coaching. The idea of a goal, reality now, options, and will. So what are you hoping to achieve? What's the reality now by way of contrast? What are the options to do that? And therefore, what will you do? But then, what an obvious connection to selling. In a perfect world, wouldn't it be great if that was the conversation that salespeople were having with their customers? What's your goal? What are you aspiring to? How do you want things to be different and better? What's the reality now? What are your options? So what will you do? Well, in that sort of way, working incrementally, you could develop a proposal together in a process that was increasingly becoming more and more compelling as you added stakeholders into the mix.
So actually, I had so the last 6 sessions I did a couple months back was with a guy called Richard Smith from Lego, which is a kind of like this is going to do a massive disservice, but how we use it internally is as a sales training call. It records the calls, looks for keywords, we can analyze the calls, there's conversational intelligence within it. Then we actually use it as a training call tool to then kind of coach within those sales calls. He was also bringing through the one of the newer things that they're looking at, and one of his predictions for where sales is going to move is in digital sales rooms. So you build, rather than have the very much kind of toing and froing of here's your proposal, what are your thoughts, and kind of here's the conversations or here's the video scenario, but creating a digital room or web page where everything that is happening, like the videos you've had, the proposals, the supporting, the T's and C's, so that people have them where when they're going through a legal process, is all there. And I think that is the thing I like about that, is it's making the sale between the seller and the prospect much more of a collaborative kind of, we both own this space, we're both communicating through that space. So I think that fits quite nicely with your model of coaching people through to a sale.
Rich, I couldn't agree with you more. I've been looking so all the way through my career. I've had a particular interest in collaborative technology. I mean, I could go back. We'll touch on some of that perhaps in a bit. But currently I've been exploring both Miro and Mural as the whiteboard tool platforms that are available. I was having a super conversation a couple of months back with somebody in a senior sales role with Red Hat, the big, huge technology company. Exactly how she is selling. Assembling workshops. So the sales process is a process of workshops where an initial group of stakeholders is brought together. Her sales role is facilitating a workshop, and the whiteboard becomes the emerging proposal. And one of the significant questions I asked was whether or not she gets drop off through the process, whether the initial group of enthusiastic stakeholders drop out of subsequent sessions. She said quite the reverse. Every time we've gone through the process so far, we're seeing the number of stakeholders grow. People are keen to become active participants in order that their perspective and priorities are shaping the emerging ideas. It's absolutely the future of bigger ticket sales where we can afford the investment of time.
Well, I think if somebody's involved in actually mapping it out, so like workshops have been great for us. It's how we approach most of the work that we do. And if somebody's involved in that and is engaged in that, and you have various stakeholders, so everybody's pulling in the same direction, it immediately gets rid of a lot of those objections that you would see, historic objections that you would see in a normal sales process. And it also, it kind of shifts the conversations to almost an element of, well, why wouldn't you buy this? You have just scoped out exactly what you need. We've gone to the challenges there. We are aware of the solutions. We are kind of, everything is aligned with what we're doing. So why wouldn't you? And so I think that you're right. That collaborative piece is powerful. So when you go into an organization now as a coach, what are some of the common issues and frustrations you see on a sales performance basis?
Yeah. Their frustrations or my frustrations with what I can see them doing?
Both, I think. And actually, that's kind of an interesting kind of viewpoint, and I hadn't thought about that. Like, I think, what are as an organization, what have I come to you to fix for me?
Probably the number one in most organizations is prospecting. Like, where are they getting, where are they filling their pipeline? Through the years. Through the years, that will have been the recurring top priority. Beyond that, I mean, I hear it less these days, Rich. But it almost became silly that the issue that I was brought in to advise on. Our team is great, Peter. They're really good. It's just closing. They're really good all the way through. They just can't close. And of course, as soon as you began to dig into it, the issue was that they were not creating value all the way through the process. So there was no compelling proposal emerging. So if you like, if those were the two topics that people raise with me, and ultimately, of course, it's all about the numbers. How do we more predictably achieve the numbers? I'll mention a third thing, just because it's come up so frequently, and it's a big issue. How do we forecast our sales more accurately? Like how do we make our revenue more reliable, our forward revenue more reliable? Because that's the engine that can drive investment, and we've got to make some investment decisions. Can we make those safely on the basis of these sales forecasts? In terms of my frustrations, as I look, and yet I suppose in effect the question is, what do I look at? I'm looking for evidence that genuinely there has been a conversation about the success that customers are seeking to achieve through a proposed investment. And all too often, the evidence that I see when I start looking at the documentation and the audit trail of the sales process, what I see is that there's been very little discussion actually about bespoke outcomes and impact. The conversation has been about what it is we've been trying to sell. Not sure if that's a good enough answer to the question just yet.
No, I think that makes sense. So, what does effective sales coaching actually look like? Like, what do you go in, what do you do, and what should be the outcomes that people would expect from that? Okay. At the heart of great coaching, of course, is asking great questions. Great coaching is all about asking great questions. And most people in a sales context have been taught about open questions, of course. My consistent experience over the years is that everybody knows about open questions, but when you put them on the spot in terms of whether or not they can do it, and ask every question in a conversation as an open question, every single one, without a closed question being there, it's a much tougher ask. And people realize the difference between knowing the difference between open and closed questions and being able to do it. Going beyond that, an absolute key to coaching and really in any context, but especially with sales, you genuinely listen to how people are responding. And ideally, the next question takes the answer we just got and digs deeper. So we get a response to a good question, and then we say, "Oh, that's interesting," and we take the best element of that and we turn that into the next open question, and like half a dozen questions in on that process, and they are exploring territory they've never been before. People are taught in agile methodologies about the 6 whys. That would be an example of, and the outcome of effective sales coaching is that we're seeking to help our customers to articulate their objectives and key results. So literally, if our sales teams could coach so effectively that at the heart of a proposal was our customers' unique statement of their OKRs, like what are we trying to achieve, and how will we measure the extent to which we achieve them? That's an outcome, and to such an extent, even to the extent that a salesperson could subsequently be held accountable 3, 6, 18 months down the line about the extent to which the customer had or had not achieved those measurable outcomes from their investment. I think that reflective piece in sales, so particularly if you have an ongoing relationship with a client, so you've got somebody who you've done it, sales process you've understood, and you referred to it as the 6 whys. I always thought it was 5 whys. Maybe I've not been asking enough of them.
I'm no black belt in agile.
that is the only sales tool that I think I've ever been taught or kind of been introduced to that I think just comes naturally. And I think part of that is because I get genuinely interested in, like, okay, so why are you doing that? How are you doing that? What is going on? Like, what are the underlying reasons for that? And I think that is the bit that I like. But coming back to your point with once you've built that understanding, if it's an ongoing relationship, like obviously cross-sell, upsell is huge. Like most of the companies we are speaking to now, the big focus for them now is retention and expansion on the customers they've already got. I forget what that is, like 24 times cheaper to retain than it is to win new, whatever the stat is. And that's if you have those initial, well, here's what we set out to do, here's what we've done, obviously, as long as those numbers are positive, it becomes a much easier conversation to say, okay, well, now's the next phase. Now we're going to do this next thing. We're going to bring in this next product or next service that can really hit into those. We've done the baseline. We're going to bring in these next things. And I think that's, from a sales perspective, quite often the most effective sellers I see in our space are the ones that are able to differentiate between almost like a land and expand. Like, here are your initial challenges. We are going to solve those based on what you've told us. Then we're going to kind of ease into a much bigger campaign. And I think that's the important thing, that sometimes salespeople, and I do it myself, like I'm definitely guilty of it, we get giddy. And so in rugby, we call it white line fever. So like you get giddy that you're going to get something across the line, and you just you forget about everything else that was supposed to be going on in that process. And I think, but it's incredibly important.
It's interesting, Rich. Your comment that absolutely agree with all of that, and you used a particular phrase there, which prompts me to mention something. You speak in terms of retention, and of course the issue that especially in a SaaS world, churn, so many subscription-based businesses are seeking to minimize churn, and I've worked with a number of organizations where that's the issue, and so this whole area of customer success management has emerged, and if I may, I'm just going to take this opportunity to differentiate. For me, the profession of customer success, what is the role of the customer success manager, and when do they get involved in the process that I'm describing? I'm differentiating really strongly. That's not what I mean by customer success. I don't. When I speak about customer success, I'm not talking about minimizing churn and maximizing upsell, cross-sell. I'm talking about people in sales, business development, account management roles becoming skilled at coaching customers to develop their part of their organization beyond what would previously have been available. And this starts with coaching people to have the vision and the confidence, the courage to imagine a different and better way of working, then to put together the plan that gets them there and articulate the OKRs that will enable senior stakeholders to have the confidence that risk is being identified and mitigated. The salespeople are assertively driving the process that creates that value in really measurable terms. But I think that's a big ask of salespeople.
But my view on that though is, so that like what you're defining there as customer success, and like making the customer successful by that initial sales process. I totally understand the differentiate, but my viewpoint on that is that by making the customer and focusing on the customer success piece in those early stages, you are going to dramatically reduce the actual, if you think about it in terms of role, like the actual customer success role at the back end of the piece, because you're going to bring in better clients with a clear understanding, and presumably your handover from sales to CS or handover from delivery to CS or whatever that is actually going to be far more, as long as that is here's what they're aiming to do, and here's what we've promised, and here's what like their intention is. They're like, you keep referring to OKRs, so like their goals, the KPIs along the milestones, whatever that is. If you're passing all of that over with the intention of making them successful, you're going to end up with a much better, much more stable client base. The CS team are actually going to be able to do their job more efficiently with far less headaches. Because if you're winning shitty fit clients at the front of the model, you're going to pump out shitty churn statistics at the back end.
But the sales team has achieved their target. The sales teams have achieved their target. They've brought the PO in. They've lobbed it over the wall to their colleagues in operations. One of the most interesting projects I'm presently involved in is with a long-term client. And I've had a significant involvement with the operational team, who are responsible for delivering the promises that their sales colleagues have made. And it's been really interesting working with these people and hearing a fundamentally different perspective. And of course, they're all genuinely committed to getting things right for customers. I have every expectation that a part of what's going to happen to sales from here on in, there's going to have to be an increasingly careful introduction of customer success colleagues probably at an earlier and earlier stage of the sales process. So it's not a question of pull the PO in, give the PO to customer success to implement. I'd even make the case that in many situations, certainly the bigger the situations, it's for people who are going to be involved in delivery roles to sign off on the deliverability of what is emerging in terms of process. And that's just another part of the stakeholder management that is the responsibility of the salesperson to manage.
We have, sorry, I'll cut you off.
You have.
So what I was going to say is that that's exactly how there's been a lot of trial and error in our sales process, our handover process, our CS process. But what we do now is we cannot, as a sales team, put through a deal and introduce a CSM to that unless it has been signed off by our head of CS or our head of delivery or our strategy director to say, yes, this is fine. You have this is going to work with this client. Then we can bring in, and sometimes we will bring the CS into the back end of the conversations, like the sales process as well, because we want people to feel engaged. We want people to feel like they have agency over the work that they're actually delivering.
Absolutely, and if we don't do that, there's every risk that sales. If it were the case, I dropped a hint of a big idea that's full of challenges. The idea that salespeople might have some accountability about whether or not customers achieve these measurable customer success outcomes. If we were going to even pay salespeople a portion of earnings relative to whether or not customers get their success, as opposed to just getting the PO, there'd be all sorts of risks that salespeople would be reluctant to step away from a situation unless they could be confident in effective handover. So what you're saying, Rich, what you've arrived at, I absolutely endorse you. Well done. And of course, it's going to give everybody more confidence about the probability of the outcome that we defined being achieved.
So in your role, you work with a number of organizations. So that, I would presume, gives you a bunch of insight. What are you seeing has happened in the market, in the spaces that you work in Q4, in Q1? Are you seeing things like sales cycle slipping? Are you seeing like people rising? Are there markets that are overachieving? Like, what is going on in the businesses that you are kind of working with?
It's an interesting question and mixed bag. One client I work with, the output of their supply is into consumer market, and some very challenging times in terms of cost of living and impact of Ukraine. And still emerging from the pandemic, so the disruption to supply chains, leading to a big uptick through back end of the year before last, through early last year, and then suddenly these shocks, and that's challenging. By contrast, a tech business that I work with has just had best quarter ever, but selling sophisticated solutions into a mature marketplace. Now they're becoming skilled at what. There's a bunch of reasons. Different answers in different sectors of the market, Rich. But ours it's a very, very small sample size.
So Andy, just go back to our CS conversation then. So Andy Turner has just said on LinkedIn, I'm in CS, plus in during the sales process to truly align on goals and objectives, manage expectations, and clearly outline the post-sales journey, cadence, and expectations from both sides. And then he's quoted Michael Jordan by saying, get the fundamentals down and the level of everything you do will rise.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, Andy. Well done.
It's cracking, and it's to do with scoping expectation, and no surprises. How do we get to a place where there's no surprises?
I think there's sales often gets a bad rap. Like, I think sometimes there's an immediate kind of this project isn't going well, or like this isn't a poor fit client because sales has missold that. And I think if you have that alignment and you have alignment, you immediately get rid of that sales has just been a yes man in this situation, or like sales has just said, yes, our product can do that. And I think if you are aligned at that point, it removes all of that and actually builds much more of a team ethos across the business. And like we try to nurture our sales team to be much more engaged with what's happening post sale. So we have like there's automation that, so let's say I sold to you, Peter, every 30 days I get a notification saying reach out to the client. It's an out of loop engagement. I'm not trying to sell you anything at that point. It's just how are things going, because we want to, as a sales team, selfishly, I want to have you in a really good position that you're super happy, so that when it comes to renewal, I can kind of nudge you across the line at that point, or I can also be there on hand for you to go, yeah, I do want this other thing, or here's another challenge that we've got. Can you help with that? So I think the alignment piece for me, but from sales, CS, delivery, super critical when we start to talk about growth.
Absolutely huge. And Rich, it's brilliant to hear the way that you're running your own team there. I'd even say that it's the person in that sales role who will have had those early stage discussions when it was all options are open, and there will have been conversation about the big vision and like the big hopes and the big hopes and aspirations. 3, 6, even 12 months in, people might still actually be caught up in the challenges of implementation, especially with something like HubSpot. There's so many moving parts, and the opportunity for somebody who had that early involvement to raise the sights again and reestablish the big vision of what might be achieved. I'm just looking at this comment from Andy, and the specific. I'm just looking at his words here. Pull us in. I'm in CS. Pull us in during the sales process to truly align on goals. Nick, my comment to Andy would be. Andy, clearly I don't know the situation that you're in, but to the extent that you're able, how assertive could you be in actually engaging in the situation and in effect requiring your colleagues to give you the opportunity of playing a role?
I'm interested to see. Sorry. I'm interested to see. So I know Andy. I know the space he works in, and so he works in a SaaS business. So I'm interested to see kind of what that kind of trigger point is. So Andy, if you're still listening, come back to us. But while we wait for Andy to come back, I'll ask you another question. He says he can be very assertive.
That's good.
Peter, I don't want to aid you with this question, but you've worked in sales and coaching through a number of economic upturns and downturns. How should sales teams deal with turbulent times? I mean, if you look at Salesforce, which is a very well-known sales organization, so CRM is their kind of their mainstay, but they have exited thousands of their sales team. What should salespeople be doing to make sure that they are being effective, and what have you seen in past economic downturns?
What an interesting question, and yes, I've seen the cycle a number of times now. I'm tempted to respond to the question on a couple of different perspectives. From the perspective of an individual salesperson, the definition of recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in GDP. Like what does that mean? It means there's been statistically a tiny turn down in economic activity across the whole of the economy. There remain an absolutely enormous range of opportunities for individual salespeople to create value in whatever space they're in. That's one response. Another response, of course, is it's economic downturns and challenging periods that sort out that filter the people who are occupying a seat and the people who can make things happen. So there's greater differentiation around effectiveness. Crumbs. What else? Can I say? That it would be it's almost kind of facile to say what goes around comes around, and hang on in there. And even now in the UK economy, we're beginning to see evidence. We're seeing Federal Reserve in the States. This should be the last of the interest rate rises in the current cycle, and the darkest part of the night is just before the morning, etc.
So this is
all to go for.
when I talk to people about this, who have gone through multiple recessions, and I think I've been through a few in my career as well, everybody, the response is always, it is always cyclical. Yes, there will be down. Yes, there will be up. It's much more the thing that I'm more interested about. And when I have conversations with kind of other business leaders and senior salespeople, is what is the time frame we're looking at? Not whether or not it will come up, but more about, okay, what is the impact time frame? And I think when we went into, one of the things that stuck in my mind when we started to go into the beginning of the pandemic was like too short pass, right? Like it is a really shitty time, and it's much more around kind of how do we hedge our bets, and by hedging our bets in sales. So for us, we are looking at like expanding our partnerships. So looking at like different tech that are kind of complementary to the services that we already offer. How do we, obviously we've got our own self-sourced sales opportunities coming through, but what can we change? How can we be more creative with what we already have? And those kind of things. So I think like for me, yeah, approaching it like it's cyclical is mentally one of those things that kind of help with stuff like this as well.
And Rich, I'm struck with the nature of your comments as the person with the, kind of in the hot seat for the whole organization with a growing team to be responsible for, where you've got to allocate, be planning, budgeting prudently and appropriately, take the growth opportunities where you can, but lock down, carefully and not commit in the way that so many of the big tech companies over recruited. With such personal cost, as you say, to tens of thousands of people. I'm
thankful that I have smarter people in me in the organization that are kind of far more breadth of that, and kind of I get to kind of do things like this on a Friday afternoon. So for you, what does a customer-centric sales approach look like? Because I think that's the core of what we're talking about. So we're talking about making them successful, but at the center of that process is obviously the customer. So what does a customer-centric sales process look like?
I'm tempted to respond by answering a slightly different question, which is, what is the opposite of a customer-centric sales process? And if I started with that and then kind of triangulate into my response to it's great. It's a great question. An approach that is not customer-centric is broadly the approach that I believe that the large majority of a lot of sales teams actually find themselves inadvertently. They are not customer-centric. They are sales target centric. Is the reality. They are sales target centric. They know exactly where they are in presently in Q2. They know where they've got to be by the end of this week. And the numbers drive the behaviors. The numbers drive the priorities. And ultimately, customers are a means to an end. Customers are the means to achieving sales target. And I'll pretend to be interested, and I'll make like I am, and I'll go through the motions, but I'm not genuinely customer centric. And that kind of approach, it's often focused on relatively generic sales processes, and a lot of it is focused around is around quantity of activity and process efficiency. put a load of stuff at the wall and manage your numbers and track your best performance, replicate that across the team, and the numbers will win. And that's not customer centric.
but that's it's difficult though, right? Because if you look at those, are particularly in larger and kind of historic. I don't mean like it's a more kind of tenured sales organizations. Those are the numbers that are dictating success in the organization. So like it is like you're saying, throw enough shit at the wall, something will stick. it's kind of churn through the data. Let's get enough calls out. We will start to, it's a numbers game, right? At that point, if you are being marked as a pass fail, you're a sales director in an organization and you are being targeted on those numbers, that is a huge leap of faith to go, actually, we're going to bin that all off. We're going to change our method. And by the way, all of those metrics that we've historically targeted on aren't necessarily the metrics that we're going to use anymore. So that's like, how do you get around that challenge? How do you break that mentality?
Absolutely. And then when the whole world of professional sales training from all of the big players is saying, but this is the way to manage the team, and so objection handling. It's the first time I've kind of drawn attention to this. We've got to handle objections effectively. We've got to learn how to handle objections in order to get to these numbers. And for me, the whole principle of objection handling is actually, is this a focus on customer centricity, or is it a focus on the sales numbers? And for every force, there's an equal and opposite force. When salespeople use their finely honed objection handling skills to manipulate the conversation around, as if by handling this objection with this one individual, we're going to get this complex deal with multiple stakeholders across the line. Rich, you're raising one of an enormous range of challenges with the approach that I'm suggesting. Clearly, the hypothesis here is that a focus, an absolutely genuine, hard-nosed, assertive focus on customer centricity, on enabling, requiring customers to articulate more accurately what they're trying to achieve. I'm suggesting that it won't just correlate with better sales numbers, it will cause better sales numbers. But I'm not suggesting for a moment that we drop proven mechanisms of managing the team and reporting to C-suite. I'm suggesting that this is a journey, and for myself, I find myself on a mission to change the sales conversation globally, away from product and service and away from what has become the norm, into a genuine customer centricity. I'd go as far as to say that when we look back on how best practice selling was being seen in the early 2020s, we'll look back and we'll be as appalled as what we see about attitudes towards misogyny and workplace bullying. If we look back to the mid-60s, and see what was commonplace there, what we're just hearing today in the reports about the culture in Scottish police, we'll look back on this period where it was appropriate for salespeople to work in these ways. All of the transactional stuff around selling is going to be taken over by AI. We know that the large language models are going to cope with so much of what's been done. The real value will be added by people who are authentically focused on creating value collaboratively with customers, enabling investments to be more successful.
So Charlie's put up a couple of comments through. Charlie, really good salesman. I go as far as saying he is probably the top biller in the organization that he works at. Presuming that's still true, Charlie. So he's put, so in terms of the question I asked around the targets, he says, hitting targets equals money. It's a necessary evil to be focused on hitting them. How do you go about hitting them without being focused on them? And then he followed up to one of the earlier comments you had about, I don't see it as an objection handling anymore. It's more about knowing the product well enough to be able to tailor it to the prospect.
Yep. Absolutely. I've got a response. I've got a response to that first observation, Charlie. Yep. I'm kind of reading this. Absolutely pragmatic response to kind of my vision enthusiasm stuff. Bottom line, absolutely necessary for sales teams to be accountable for achieving their numbers reliably. And if I kind of step into Rich's world just for a moment, it's to do with managing your pipeline incredibly rigorously. So you get into, and I know you'll know this, Charlie, from I can see it from the quality of your comments. It's to do with spending enough time filling that pipeline with prospects at all times, so we are not dependent on too few opportunities that have to be pulled across the line on the last day of the quarter and all that. We've absolutely got to hit our numbers, and we do that by delivering an oversupply of opportunity. So we choose the ones that we decide to pull across the line in good time. We don't fail in our numbers. We can combine these two apparent conflicts. We absolutely hit the numbers, definitely, but we do it with an enlightened self-interest, knowing that if we put our customers' priorities first, well, it's going to result in a greater probability of getting the numbers.
So Charlie has segued beautifully into my next question with his second comment there around knowing the product well enough to be able to tailor it to the prospect. So sometimes in sales, we're selling complex solutions. So we sell tech and services, which is actually a multiple tech and multiple services, and we're addressing multiple challenges. So what we are selling becomes a complex sale, and it takes quite a lot to get around that. How do sales leaders ensure their team are skilled enough to be able to coach a prospect through that process?
So Rich, the questions are that's just super. So it's all very well me speaking about a vision of customer centricity and coaching customers and so on. How does a sales team leader enable every member of their team to have the competencies and the confidence, the courage to have this kind of conversation with customers? And that comes down to I mentioned that I'd come back to my viola. I'll briefly touch back on the viola. It'll go in its case a bit later on today. I'm off to the orchestra rehearsal. I took up cello at age 40. And the reason was that by the time I got to 40, I'd been doing this sales training stuff for a dozen years, and I'd made a few, I had a lot of success and so on. But I was getting increasingly frustrated that some of the things that were self-evident to me were not self-evident. I was not changing behaviors in the way that I wanted to through my training. And I did a load of research. I went away and did a lot of work on how people learn. And it turns out it's a complicated thing to manage learning. And there are some proven processes that work. Now, without going into all the ins and outs, the bottom line is that unless people are supported in learning new and different ways, they'll simply continue taking shortcuts, doing what they've always done. The most significant role that a sales team leader can play is equipping the members of their team to become increasingly effective. So coaching the members of their sales team is pivotal. Ideally, there'll be a learning and earning plan in place with every individual member of the sales team, and the coaching will not be pipeline coaching exclusively. It'll be about how are you going about developing skills. I'll wrap up with one. As a sales team leader, become really skilled at role play. And role play with the members of your team extensively, because it's doing it, not talking about it, that changes skills.
So role playing is one of the things that I hate most about learning and development from a personal perspective, but the impact far outweighs my distaste for having to go through that process, because it is.
Well done, Rick.
Because it's one of those things that you are in a position, particularly with your colleagues, and if it's anything like our team, we like asking each other really hard questions, not because we want to see each other fail, but because it's kind of funny, and that helps you develop your understanding of the knowledge and what's needed. The other thing that we do with our sales team, so on a quarterly basis, the whole organization downs tools for a day. We go through a certification day. So it'll either be HubSpot certifications, Drift certifications, video certification, internal training, all of those things. It's a whole day down tools, get as many certs and kind of build that knowledge you can. Sales are very much part of that process. Sales are expected to go through that learning so that they have an understanding. We also have weekly learning lunches, although a lot of them are remote now, but a learning lunch that sales are invited to, that they can then learn about new products, new services, and importantly, the way delivery actually deliver, because that feeds into their knowledge. So they can then go, yeah, we're going to talk about your workshop process. Here are the things that you're going to get out of the back end. Here's why we do it. Here's the timeline and all that kind of stuff. And I think that makes them much better sellers than kind of any of the process driven. So like typically, and I'll ask you in a minute about like how you find good salespeople. I know I was meant to be short and sweet, but I'm enjoying the conversation. So as long as you're still good to go, we'll keep going. So like we will look for the classics, like, are they able to build rapport? Are they able to communicate? Are they kind of driven? Like, are they trying to achieve something? But then also like that learning and adaptability. Those are the key things that when we're looking for sales team members, we wanted to bring into the organization, because it is like they are the things that we see make effective sellers in that process. So I'm going to segue perfectly into the same question for you. How do you identify good talent as a sales leader?
And this is in the context of recruitment. So we're looking for if there was a one-word answer to the question, it would be, and this is a conversation I've had with a number of recent clients. Recruiting for curiosity. Recruiting for curiosity.
I like it.
Which you can see evidence of in first discussion. If there's evidence of curiosity, won't it be great when they become curious about a prospect's situation and exploring together the opportunities for improvement? So all of that, and again, Rich, I'm just repeating what you said here now. The capacity to learn. Where's the second word that I'd absolutely be focusing on in any recruitment context is evidence. So where is the evidence to support the response you just given me in this interview? I'm really pleased to hear that you can do X or Y or Z. Love to hear some stories where you could support that, even if you're coming in from a non-sales background, which are some of the very best potential salespeople have not been in sales, and they can become some of the most effective salespeople, because it can be so hard to change inappropriate sales behaviors if people have been taught the rather more manipulative conventional approaches. It can sometimes be really, really hard to get that out. Is this helping as a response?
Yeah, and I think so. On a kind of a generic level, I think that, I mean, there's some super specialist roles that are super hard to find, but I think hiring salespeople is one of the hardest hires you have to make in an organization. And part of that is because a good salesperson should be able to sell themselves. And then it's being able to kind of dig through that and make sure that they are actually going to achieve the things. Are you hissing at me because you don't agree with that?
Oh, no, I couldn't agree more. And I'm just there's a gallery of faces crossing my memory, Rich, of bad hires that I have made, bad hires that I have helped be made, bad hires that my clients have made. I'm watching them cross the screen in my mind's eye, and it's because, and you've hit the nail on the head. They sold themselves. They were enthusiastic, confident, knowledgeable. They knew what to say, and it didn't work out. And of course, if we're talking about sales team recruitment, of course, the comment that has to be made, because it's just got to be there. Always be recruiting. That anybody leading a sales team always be recruiting. In the awareness that who's nearest the door for whatever reason. Salespeople have to produce results. And sales team leaders have to have options. And the sad thing is that as soon as you build a perfect team, and you get everything running absolutely brilliantly, some of your best people are poached because somebody else comes along and is able, for whatever reason, their business model supports a package that we can't go to. So there you go, and wish them well. And such a tough challenge.
My top tip for hiring is that you reach back out to recruiters who come to you to offer you people. So as you get approached on LinkedIn for people that are trying to hire into you or give you to hire, is you reach back out to them and ask if they are interested in exploring a sales-based role, because they are generally numbers focused, they are good sellers, and they are in quite often a difficult market space, and sometimes quite open to kind of moving away from recruitment as well. So that is, and it's also a conversation where they have come to you in that conversation as well. So it's actually quite a good way of getting into them. Charlie said he also strongly agrees the person you get day one is rarely the one you interviewed. Coming back to bring people in. So you touched on it briefly before. Generative AI is everywhere now.
Yep.
How do you think platforms like ChatGPT fit into a sales process now?
In so many ways. One of my clients, we were running through this in a group session a couple of weeks back, and I was facilitating a group, and one colleague blew their other colleagues away with the number of times they're already using ChatGPT every day. To helping them to write a LinkedIn article. So what are the 6 most important points of topic X? And and it comes back with your post pretty well written for you. What are the? It's incredibly early days. Everybody is taken by surprise at the speed with which this technology is emerging. That's the nature of exponential technology. It isn't just that this tech is going quickly; it is accelerating, and it's going to have absolutely profound impacts in the world of selling. It's going to hollow out very substantially swathes of the world of personal selling. It's going to differentiate. It's going to mean that the people that we're looking for people who can create value authentically because of their capacity to empathize and integrate, to identify and bring together stakeholders. AI can't do that. AI can't see the political challenges between person X and person Y in a way that a skilled person can if they're looking for that kind of stuff. It's going to have huge impacts, Rich, full of opportunity and threat, depending.
So the places that we've already started using it and we're seeing it more and more is in the research and analysis phases. So you can give it data sets, you can pull lists of people from sales now, you can put them into ChatGPT and then ask it to create a
prioritized list
structure.
Prioritized list and org structure. Who do I call first? And when I call them, what's the most likely successful approach to this individual, given what we know about what can be scraped about them?
Well, not even scrape, but like for people in this industry, in this space, what are the challenges that they are likely to face? So give me an understanding of what are their challenges, because then it comes back into that coaching. Okay, I know what I'm selling. I understand what their challenges probably are. Can I then use that as part of my outreach? So I think that research,
ChatGPT. What are the words that my prospect will be using that I won't be using? What's their vocabulary? How would a person in a role X articulate this challenge?
You can also use it to transcribe and analyze sales conversations as well. So you can use that on. There's plenty of tools out there. Like a Lego that we mentioned at the beginning of the call is kind of one of those as well that allow you to do things like that. But you can also pull transcripts in there and ask it to summarize this. Give me an understanding, like what is the sentiment? Summarize this. Give me the bullet points. So you can do a lot with it. And I think it will accelerate. The thing I have a distaste for is where people are replacing personalization with automation, from a straight out. Like I think it has its place, but I think my view on AI and where it's going to be most powerful in sales, marketing, and service is where it is assisting the human, not replacing the human.
I've seen some of the videos from Microsoft with the launch of Copilot that they're bringing into the Office suite. And one of the videos that they've got about Outlook, here's an email, and Copilot in the YouTube video says, "Would you like to turn this into a proposal?" Yes, no, and it isn't a proposal in the terms that I that I would be aspiring. Rich, it's going to have huge impact in every area of society, and at the moment, we're all the fact that the UK competition authorities have just launched the inquiry, huge impact. Yeah.
If you could build the perfect sales organization, what would it look like? What would be the main areas you'd focus on building up momentum?
Perfect. Okay. It would start the very first, the cornerstone of the perfect sales organization would be absolutely outstanding sales team leader. that would be the kind of starting point, because the role of sales team leader is so significant, make or break. It's their role to build, develop, support the team, enable the team to perform. So there would be a fabulous sales team leader. What would be their characteristics? They'd be a wonderfully inspiring, visionary leader with stacks of integrity and but very rigorous with all the process. There would be a really thorough grounding in the tech. They would thoroughly understand how to get the best out of CRM and marketing automation, and I mean, essentially everything that HubSpot does. Your best sales team would, whether they were using HubSpot or a range of other tools that they'd assembled to replicate what HubSpot can do, so that there would be terrific integration with their colleagues in marketing, and their operational colleagues, as we were discussing earlier.
Yep.
It would be a team who were incredibly supportive. Oh, that's a really. I just saw the question from Gary. It's
Good
Gary.
question from Gary.
Forgive me. I'm going to answer that question, because Gary just asked, does that sales team leader need to have been a top performer as a sales rep? Gary, it's a great question, and my answer is really clear, very explicit. Absolutely not. In the world of sports, as we know, some of the very best sports coaches have not been the top players of their generation, but they are the top coaches. So it's a fundamentally different skill set, different characteristics, different personal drivers. But of course, Gary, as you're implying, it's a mistake that's often made. You take your best salesperson, and what's not to like. You tell everybody else how you did it, and put them in job. Back to your question, though, Rich. There would be some fabulous, well-defined, customer-centric sales processes, and there would be a stack of evidence. The evidence that I seek when I'm working, you touched on this earlier on. Where's the evidence that we are customer focused? Where's the evidence is that the documentation is full of words that person doesn't normally use when they are trying to spell out what it is that our products and services do. The evidence is that it's our customers' vocabulary. I could carry it. They would be incredibly supportive. It would be a learning. It would be a group that was really supportive of each other. The characters would have been really well matched to the characteristics of the segmentation that they were adopting in terms of how they were going to market as a team. And they would forecast and deliver their numbers rock solid, reliable, plus or minus 2%, quarter on quarter on quarter. They'd be a machine.
I like it.
Can I sign you up for one? Yeah, and of course, far easier to say all that than to achieve it in the real world.
Right. Next question is my favorite question. What's your biggest career fuck up so far? The one you learned the most from?
I had notice of this. Rich, you told me that you were going to ask me about the most significant career fuck up, and what I learned. And I'm sure if you've asked other people, I'm sure you'll have had this response. There at this stage of career, and this duration of career, there have been so many. And it was quite salutary going back over them all. The biggest was I came across a character in the mid-90s. Long story short, really outstanding techie, Microsoft certified and so on. It's mid-90s now, and the pair of us started a goldmine solution partner business. I don't know whether does goldmine mean anything to you, Rich, as a name?
I think I've heard it once or twice.
So mid-90s, it was state-of-the-art CRM. And we started a goldmine solution partner business, and I was really excited about it. It offered so much prospect. Bottom line, I went for 2 years taking no income from the business, supporting it, and supporting a team. We were bringing revenue in, but it was a net outflow from personal finance for a long time, and we didn't get it to profitable traction. And so when it went down, it was a huge big deal, with kind of big life changing implications, and too many lessons to be learned. What do I learn? You get profitable. Oh, too many lessons to in terms of relating it to this conversation in that setting, if only I knew now if only I knew then what I know now, an awful lot of the problems that we were working with. I had a super team. The team that had chosen to work together, super individuals, cracking strengths, and it was such a disappointment that we weren't able to make it work. In retrospect, I was in a leadership role, and I was insufficiently rigorous about scoping the projects that we were taking on. So because I knew what this stuff could do, I was promising the earth, and of course, we then ran into all sorts of issues with unmanaged expectation.
Was it under promise and over deliver? Is one of the early learnings I had in my career. It makes things much easier. And it comes back to that kind of CS angle at the back end of the process as well. If you are over delivering your promises, it's a much nicer conversation to be having than being able to under deliver. Second to last question, and then I'll let you go. What excites you most about sales and growth right now?
The world of selling is a brilliant place to be, and sadly, far too many people have negative perceptions, of course, because of societal stereotypes, caricatures, but unfortunately driven by many of the practices which are presently at the heart of conventional sales training. It makes for behaviors which a lot of customers find objectionable. Rich, you'll have read the reports about the percent, the Gartner reports that speak of the number of customers that would rather purchase without contact with the salesperson. And that's so sad, because selling is such a creative place, such a brilliantly valuable place to be, to make the world a better place. For me, the most interesting part of that whole ecosystem, how does sales work? I've already alluded to it in the conversation. The role of the sales team leader is just pivotal. So the bit that I find most exciting is helping sales team leaders to have a vision for a fundamentally different way of selling that delivers all the stuff we've been talking about. Genuinely, really, absolute passionate advocates as customers, people who aren't just happy. They are the whole HubSpot flywheel. They are passionate evangelists on our behalf, because of the way we sold, because of the right from the outset, we won the business, and we established long-term partnership relationships that are going to go on making the world a better place and creating value. So the connection between that, the strength of that vision, the magnitude of the contrast between conventional approaches to selling and what's available, supported by tech that continues to grow exponentially, in terms of the ease and speed with which value can be created virtually. That's what's going to keep me excited for a long time to come.
Okay, last question. Who should I interview next?
Oh, do you know? You gave me fair warning on that, and I hadn't reflected on it.
Who do you follow in the sales space?
Say again.
Who do you follow? Who do you engage with? Who do you like what they're saying about sales or growth?
There's a character. I don't know how the extent to which he'd welcome me jumping on the name just now. There's somebody who's been coaching me over the last 18 months or so, who I've come to respect absolutely hugely, and sorry, Harry, I'm dropping unit, mate. Harry Gervin. Who is CEO of a company called Simplicity Group in Belfast. Rich, unfortunately, they're Salesforce. They're based in Salesforce.
Everybody makes mistakes.
He is a hugely impressive individual, building a really effective business in the tech world, a portfolio of companies. They're in vehicle telematics, cameras, telecoms, and related stuff. And he plays a very significant role with an organization, something called the Entrepreneurs Organization. Richard, I don't know whether you've come across EO. So Harry is a senior figure. He spent last week in Cape Town with 2,000 other leaders from EO, and was telling me about some of the stuff there. He would be an outstanding person to interview.
I shall reach out to him.
I'll mention that I mentioned his name on air.
Yeah. Peter, thanks for being up for doing 6 sessions with me. If anybody wants to follow up with you, how do you want people to connect?
Salesreset.com. And if you were to head to salesreset.com or peterbutton.com, by all means, Peter Button on LinkedIn. And Rich, I've actually been keeping quite a low profile around Sales Reset. I've hardly put anything on LinkedIn for a long time because I was clarifying some aspects of what was going on. I've just started the Sales Reset LinkedIn group, which literally started it today, and it's as an opening involvement into a Sales Reset community of practice, and what we're building at the moment. My vision, my goal is a global community of practice, with a particular interest in supporting sales team leaders with this vision, and trying to find answers, Rich, to some of the tough questions you raised, like how do you measure, how do you keep on delivering. So anyway, salesreset.com. And if anybody's been on the session, I'd love to meet you in our private group. We've started the LinkedIn group as a private one, but just a request to join, and be lovely to see you there.
Perfect. I'll get the URL from you and I'll put it in the show notes as well. Peter, thank you very much and have a good weekend. See you later, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.